For his 40th birthday, I gave my husband a box filled with 15 years of our memories, a testament to our perfect life together. It was a beautiful, handcrafted wooden chest, filled with everything from ticket stubs from our first movie date to the tiny hospital bracelet from when our daughter was born. It wasn't until later that night, after he'd gone to bed, that I found a hidden folder on the new digital frame I'd included, and heard his voice calmly explain that our entire marriage had been a lie, and that he was finally getting bored of pretending to be human. The day had been perfect, or at least, my version of perfect. We had a small gathering in our backyard, the kind of comfortable, sun-drenched affair you see in commercials for antidepressants. Our two kids, 10-year-old Chloe and 7-year-old Leo, ran around with their cousins, their laughter the soundtrack to the clinking of glasses and the low hum of adult conversation. Liam, my Liam, was the picture of contentment. He stood by the grill, a craft beer in one hand and a spatula in the other, his smile easy and his eyes, a warm, reassuring blue, crinkling at the corners just so. He was a successful architect, the kind of man who could build a skyscraper and then come home and patiently help his son with a Lego castle. He was calm, logical, my rock. Everyone said so. "You're so lucky," Amelia, my sister, had sighed, watching him expertly flip burgers. "He's just so solid." I'd beamed, my heart swelling with a familiar, comfortable pride. "He's the best," I'd agreed, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I was a kindergarten teacher, a professional nurturer of small humans. My life was a whirlwind of glitter, story time, and scraped knees. Liam's steady presence was the anchor that kept my chaotic world from spinning off its axis. The grand finale of the party was the memory box. I'd been working on it for months, a sentimental project fueled by late-night cups of tea and the soft glow of my laptop screen as I sorted through years of digital photos. I'd curated our life together, the awkward first photo in a dimly lit pub, the sun-kissed honeymoon shots from Italy, the blurry, sleep-deprived selfies with our newborn babies. I'd even printed out some of the funny, early days emails we'd sent each other. When I presented it to him, his reaction was exactly what I'd hoped for. He traced the engraving on the lid, a quote from our wedding vows, and opened it slowly. He picked through the items, a small, genuine-looking smile playing on his lips. He held up the ultrasound picture of Chloe, then the little clay handprint Leo had made in my class. "This is incredible, Ames," he'd said, his voice thick with what I interpreted as emotion. He'd pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and secure around me. "Thank you." The last gift inside the box was a high-end digital photo frame. I preloaded it with some of my favorites, I explained, but I figured we could connect it to the cloud so it'll update with new pictures automatically. "Great idea," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "You think of everything." That night, after the last of the guests had trickled out and the kids were sound asleep, I found Liam in his home office, staring out the window at the moonlit garden. He had that distant look he sometimes got, a look I'd always chalked up to the pressures of his demanding job. He'd turn his focus inward, processing complex structural problems or intricate design flaws. I'd learned to give him his space during these moments. "Tired?" I asked softly from the doorway. He turned, his expression unreadable for a second before it settled into a familiar, gentle smile. "Just thinking. It was a good day. Thank you again for the gift. It was very thoughtful." He went to bed shortly after, but I was still buzzing from the day. I decided to get the photo frame set up in the living room as a final touch. I plugged it in, the screen flickering to life with a picture of us on a hike, the mountains majestic behind us, our faces bright with happiness. The setup was simple enough. Connect to the Wi-Fi, then sync with the cloud service. We used the family's shared cloud account for everything, a massive digital attic where we stored photos, documents, and backups of all our devices. I navigated through the menus, my fingers tapping against the cool glass of the frame's remote. I selected our family account and the system began to sync. A progress bar crawled across the screen. I was about to go make myself a cup of chamomile tea when I noticed something odd. The sync was pulling in more than just the photos folder. It was also syncing a folder I'd never seen before, labeled simply log. Curiosity, that fatal human flaw, got the better of me. I clicked on it. Inside wasn't a collection of pictures or documents, but hundreds of audio files. They were meticulously named, a clinical string of numbers, date, year, entry number. The oldest was dated just a week after our wedding day. The most recent was from this morning. My heart started a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. What was this? Had Liam started a podcast? Was it work related? Dictations about his projects. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation. I clicked on the most recent file, the one from today, his birthday. I raised the volume, and my husband's voice filled the silent house. But it wasn't the warm, familiar voice I knew. It was flat, detached, a voice stripped of all emotion, like a scientist dictating lab notes. Log entry 5478, it began. Subject, 40th birthday celebration. The social simulation was a success. Emotional responses were performed within expected parameters. The memory box was a particularly interesting variable. Amelia's sentimentality remains a predictable, if inefficient, emotional driver. The gift is a tangible representation of her constructed reality. An analysis of its contents confirms that the narrative of our shared life has been successfully maintained. However, the energy expenditure required to mirror her emotional state for a sustained period is becoming taxing. The experiment is approaching its logical conclusion. The world tilted on its axis. I sank to the floor, the remote clattering from my numb fingers. The voice from the speakers was Liam's, but it was a version of him I had never heard before. It was a stranger's voice, a clinical, cold monotone that spoke of our life, our love, our family, as if it were a science project, an experiment. I snatched the remote and frantically scrolled back, my hands shaking so violently I could barely control my movements. I stabbed at a random file from years ago, sometime around when Leo was born. Log entry 2555, the voice said, emotionless as ever. The introduction of a second offspring has complicated the domestic simulation. Amelia's hormonal fluctuations are extreme, resulting in unpredictable emotional outbursts. Sleep deprivation is a significant performance inhibitor. However, the new subject provides an opportunity to study early-stage attachment behaviors. I have successfully mimicked the appropriate paternal responses, holding the subject, vocalizing soothing sounds, and feigning exhaustion. These actions appear to be effective in reinforcing Amelia's perception of a shared parental experience. I felt the air leave my lungs, a strangled sob catching in my throat. Feigning exhaustion? Mimicking paternal responses. I remembered those early days with Leo, the endless nights of crying and feeding. Liam had been my rock. He'd walked the floors with our screaming son, whispering reassurances to both of us. He'd held me when I'd cried from sheer fatigue, telling me we were a team, that we'd get through it together. It had all been an act, a performance. I had to hear more. I had to know everything. For the next hour, I sat on the floor of my perfect living room, in my perfect house, and listened to the systematic deconstruction of my entire life. I jumped around the timeline, a horrified tourist skipping through the curated exhibits of a museum dedicated to a lie. I listened to an entry from our 5th anniversary. He described the romantic dinner I'd planned with the detached precision of a restaurant critic, analyzing my peak emotional response to the diamond earrings he'd given me. He noted that the financial outlay was a strategic investment in maintaining the stability of the simulation. The earrings I was wearing right now. I reached up and touched one, the cold diamond feeling like a shard of ice against my skin. There was a log from the day I was promoted to head teacher at my school. I'd been so proud, so ecstatic. I'd called him, babbling with excitement. He'd told me he was proud of me, that he'd known I could do it. The audio log from that evening told a different story. Amelia has achieved a professional milestone, the voice stated. This development is advantageous. Her increased sense of self-worth will require less external validation from me, reducing my active maintenance duties. Her happiness is a useful, self-sustaining variable. Every cherished memory, every milestone, every intimate moment was catalogued, analyzed, and stripped of all meaning. He talked about our arguments as conflict simulations to test his de-escalation scripts. He referred to our lovemaking as scheduled intimacy protocols designed to maintain the pair bond. Our children, Chloe and Leo, were the subjects, their developmental stages observed and documented with the cold curiosity of a biologist studying a new species. He spoke of their hugs, their I love you, daddies, their scraped knees and nightmare-fueled tears as mere data points. The most terrifying part was the detail. He had documented it all. He had a file for everything. He'd recorded his struggle, not a struggle with a personality disorder, but a struggle to perfect his performance. He talked about studying movies, reading psychology textbooks, and observing other couples to learn how to better mimic human emotion. He spoke of empathy subroutines and emotional mirroring. He described having to consciously remind himself to smile, to make eye contact for a specific duration, to modulate his tone of voice to convey warmth. He was a machine, a complex, intelligent machine wearing my husband's face. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The man I had shared a bed with for 15 years, the father of my children, was a complete stranger. Our life together wasn't real. It was a stage, and I had been the only one who didn't know I was in a play. My mind raced, trying to find a flaw in his horrifying logic, a crack in his story. Had there been signs? I thought back over our years together. His calmness in crises, which I'd always seen as strength, now seemed like an unnerving lack of emotional response. His logical, problem-solving approach to everything, which I'd admired, now felt like the cold calculus of a computer program. His occasional social awkwardness, his moments of quiet detachment, I had always made excuses for them. He's just an introvert. He's tired from work. He processes things differently. I was his unwitting accomplice, helping him maintain his cover story. I scrolled to the end of the list, my finger hovering over the very first entry, recorded just 1 week after our wedding. My hands were slick with sweat as I pressed play. Log entry 001, the voice said. It was younger, but just as flat, just as devoid of feeling. The long-term experiment in sustained domestic normalcy has officially commenced. The subject, Amelia, has been selected for her high degree of emotional transparency and her conventional expectations of partnership. She is sentimental, trusting, and possesses a strong desire for family, making her an ideal primary participant. My hypothesis is that, through meticulous observation and mimicry, I can maintain a convincing performance of a neurotypical husband and father for an indefinite period. The primary objective is to determine if a complex social structure like a family can be successfully simulated without any genuine emotional investment. The simulation begins now. The simulation begins now. Those words echoed in the cavernous silence of my house, of my life. For 15 years, I had been the primary participant in an experiment I never knew I was a part of. My love, my trust, my vulnerability, they weren't gifts I had given to a partner, they were variables being measured by a scientist. I shut off the photo frame, plunging the room into darkness, but the images it had shown me were burned into my mind. I saw Liam at our wedding, his eyes fixed on me as I walked down the aisle. I had thought it was adoration. Now I saw it as observation. I saw him holding Chloe for the first time, his expression a perfect replica of awe. Now I knew he was studying her, a new subject. I saw him comforting me after my mother's funeral, his embrace firm and steady. He wasn't sharing my grief, he was performing a role, hitting his marks. I stumbled upstairs, my legs feeling like lead. I had to see him. I had to look at his face and try to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the monster whose voice was still ringing in my ears. I pushed open our bedroom door. He was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a steady, even rhythm. His face, so handsome and familiar in the moonlight filtering through the window, was a mask. A placid, perfectly constructed mask. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if even his breathing was a conscious, calculated act. I backed away slowly, my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. I couldn't be in that room. I couldn't be near him. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, shivering despite the warmth of the house. I didn't sleep. I just stared into the darkness, my mind a maelstrom of fear and betrayal. Who was he? The audio files mentioned a struggle, but not with guilt or a desire to be different. His struggle was with the sheer effort of the performance. He was an actor in a one-man show with a 15-year run, and he was getting tired. The final log entry from his birthday confirmed it. The energy expenditure is becoming taxing. The experiment is approaching its logical conclusion. What did that mean? What was the logical conclusion to his experiment? My blood ran cold. He wasn't just a man incapable of love, he was a man who saw his family as a disposable project. A project he was getting bored of. The chillingly logical decision to conclude the experiment in the most efficient way possible. What was the most efficient way? My mind, the mind of a kindergarten teacher who spent her days putting on bandages and settling disputes over who got the red crayon, was suddenly forced to think like a survivalist. Efficiency. What would be efficient? A clean break. No messy emotional fallout to manage, no protracted divorce proceedings, no custody battles. Just an ending. A quiet, tidy, and final ending. The sun started to rise, casting a pale, gray light into the living room. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. Footsteps. He was awake. My body went rigid. I heard the shower turn on. My Liam, the man who always brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, was getting ready for the day. But it wasn't my Liam. It was a stranger, a predator who had lived in my home, shared my bed, and raised my children while studying us like insects under glass. I had to get the kids out. That was my first and only clear thought. Chloe and Leo. They weren't just subjects. They were my babies. They were real, with real hearts and real love for a father who saw them as nothing more than data. The thought of what he might do, of what his cold logic might deem efficient, made me physically ill. When he came downstairs, he was my Liam again. He was dressed in his usual weekend attire of a soft, worn t-shirt and jeans. He smiled when he saw me on the couch. "Morning, Ames," he said, his voice warm and familiar. The voice he used for his performance. "You're up early." I forced my lips into a smile that felt like a grimace. "Couldn't sleep." "Late night with a photo frame?" he asked, heading into the kitchen. The casualness of the question was a physical blow. "Something like that," I managed, my voice raspy. He started the coffee maker, his movements economical and precise, just as they always were. "The kids still sleeping?" "I think so," I whispered. "Good. I was thinking we could all go for a drive today. Up to the lake. Have a picnic. It's a perfect day for it." My heart hammered against my ribs. A drive? To the lake? A secluded, picturesque spot where anything could happen. Was this it? Was this the efficient conclusion? My mind flashed to news reports of family annihilators, of men who decided to end it all and take their families with them. They were always described by neighbors as quiet, normal, stable. Just like Liam. I had a choice to make, right here, right now, as he stood there calmly waiting for the coffee to brew. Do I confront him? Do I scream, rage, and demand to know who the hell he is? But what would that accomplish? He wasn't a man I could reason with or appeal to. He had no emotions to appeal to. Confronting him would only show my hand. It would let the scientist know that his subject had become aware of the experiment. And I had no idea how he would react to that. He was dangerously unpredictable. Or do I play along? Do I pretend that everything is normal? Do I smile and pack a picnic and get my children into the car with a man who might be planning to erase them? But if I played along, I could buy myself time. Time to think, time to plan, time to get my children to safety. He turned from the counter, two mugs in his hands. He held one out to me, his expression the perfect picture of loving concern. You okay? You look pale. I took the mug, my hand trembling so much that hot coffee sloshed onto my fingers. I barely felt the burn. I looked into his eyes, the warm blue eyes of the man I had loved for 15 years, and for the first time, I saw nothing behind them. Just a cold, calculating void. I'm fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Just tired. A picnic sounds lovely. The word lovely tasted like ash in my mouth. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to grab the kids and run, but I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that any sudden, irrational move would be my last. I was no longer dealing with my husband. I was dealing with a creature of pure, cold logic. If he sensed I knew, if he thought his experiment was compromised, his conclusion might be accelerated. My only chance was to play my part in his simulation, just as he had played his in mine. I spent the next hour on autopilot, my body moving through the familiar Sunday morning routine while my mind raced, calculating, planning, searching for a way out. I woke the kids with kisses and promises of a fun day at the lake, my voice a high, brittle imitation of cheerfulness. Chloe and Leo, bless their innocent hearts, were ecstatic. They chattered excitedly about skipping stones and feeding the ducks, oblivious to the monster in the room with them. While they got dressed, I packed the picnic basket. My hands shook as I made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, slicing off the crusts just the way Leo liked them. Every mundane object in my kitchen seemed alien, a prop on a stage set. The family photos stuck to the fridge with cartoon magnets, the crayon drawings, the school notices, all evidence of a life that wasn't real. Liam was unnervingly normal. He helped Chloe with a stubborn shoelace, his movements patient and gentle. He quizzed Leo on his spelling words for an upcoming test. He was the perfect father, the perfect husband. The performance was flawless. And that's what made it so terrifying. He was a chameleon, a predator hiding in plain sight. I had to get my children away from him. My chance came when he went out to the garage to get the cooler from the car. I need to run up and use the bathroom and grab a jacket. I called out, my voice straining to sound casual. I flew up the stairs, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I bypassed the bathroom and went straight into our bedroom. I grabbed my purse and stuffed my wallet, keys, and phone inside. Then I went into the kids' rooms. My hands were clumsy as I pulled their small backpacks from their hooks. I threw in a change of clothes for each of them, their toothbrushes, and their favorite stuffed animals, a scruffy-looking bear for Leo and a flop-eared bunny for Chloe. Anything to give them a sliver of comfort in the chaos that was about to unfold. I took a deep breath and walked back downstairs. Liam was in the kitchen, packing drinks into the cooler. He looked up and smiled. Ready to go? Almost, I said, forcing another smile. I walked over to the back door. Kids, let's go. Last one to the car is a rotten egg. Chloe and Leo came barreling past me, their laughter echoing in the hallway. I watched them run out into the sunshine, a painful lump forming in my throat. I had to get them clear. Amelia. Liam's voice cut through my thoughts. He was standing by the door now, his brow furrowed in a perfect imitation of concern. Are you coming? This was it. My moment. My one shot. You know what, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I completely forgot. I promised my sister I'd drop off that book she lent me. She only lives 5 minutes from here. Why don't you and the kids head to the lake, and I'll meet you there? I'll be right behind you. He was still for a moment, his blue eyes studying my face. I could feel his mind working, analyzing my words, my expression, my posture. Was my heart rate elevated? Was my breathing too shallow? Was I deviating from my baseline behavior? For a terrifying second, I thought he'd see right through me. Then he nodded. Okay, that seems logical. Don't be too long. The kids will be impatient to start the picnic. He walked out the door, and I watched him get into the driver's seat of our family SUV. He buckled his seatbelt, adjusted the mirror, and gave me a final, small wave before pulling out of the driveway. He was leaving. He was actually leaving. The moment his car turned the corner at the end of our street, I sprang into action. I didn't have much time. He'd expect me at the lake in 30 minutes, maybe an hour at most. When I didn't show, he'd know something was wrong. I ran back into his office, to the source of this nightmare. I grabbed the digital photo frame, yanking the cord from the wall. I couldn't leave the evidence, the proof of his madness. The audio logs were my only leverage, my only way to make anyone believe my insane story. I shoved the frame into a tote bag. Then I ran. I didn't grab anything else. Not my laptop, not my clothes, not the photo albums filled with 15 years of lies. Just my children, the audio logs, and the contents of my purse. I got into my own car, my hands fumbling with the keys. I didn't drive towards my sister's house. I didn't drive towards the lake. I got on the highway and headed south, with no destination in mind other than away. As I drove, the full weight of what I had done, what I was doing, crashed down on me. I had left my home, my life, everything I had ever known. I had taken my children from their father. What would I tell them? How could I ever explain that the man they loved, the man who tucked them in at night and taught them how to ride their bikes, wasn't real? And what about Liam? What would he do when he realized his experiment had escaped? His logical, efficient mind would process my flight not as a betrayal, but as a complication, a problem to be solved. And I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that he would come looking for us. Not because he loved us, not because he missed us, but because his experiment was not yet concluded. We were loose variables, and he would need to tidy up his project. I don't know where we're going to go or what we're going to do. I have the audio files. Maybe I can take them to the police, but what would I say? My husband is a psychopath who faked being human for 15 years, and I know this because he kept a secret audio diary. They'd think I was crazy. So, for now, we just drive. Chloe and Leo fell asleep in the back seat hours ago, their innocent faces peaceful and untroubled. I look at them in the rearview mirror, my two beautiful, real, loving children, and I know I made the only choice I could. I chose to save them from the simulation. I just hope, with every fiber of my being, that we can run far enough and fast enough to escape the man who created it. I don't know if he's hunting us, but I know one thing for sure. The experiment isn't over. It's just entered a new, terrifying phase. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.